Hey everyone, my name is Matt Romanchik, and I'm the founder and host of The Conscious Vibe. The Conscious Vibe is that feeling you get when you look up at the stars. It's that feeling you get when you see your newborn child for the first time. It's that feeling you get when you're part of something you know you believe in. This is the podcast where we explore all those things. I would like to welcome you to this conscious earth. Shout out once again to John Arn for that opening track. Thanks so much for submitting that, dude, because I think it's a pretty awesome song. This episode is sponsored by Burke Superfoods, and I got to thank them for reaching out and being willing to give us 10% off on their health and nutritional supplements, because I've been trying to eat healthy for a really long time now, and I just think it's awesome when there's companies out there who are supporting organic food and stuff that really comes from the earth. It's that kind of stuff that we need to support. So if you enter the code Stay Conscious at checkout, they've been willing to give us 10% off, which is pretty cool. You can find all that at their website, apollogenesis.com. This is the second part of the interview in which I talk to Ryan Muetzel. In this episode, we talk primarily about plant medicine. And firstly, I'd like to say we do not condone the illegal use of such things. And secondly, if you're down with that, I think it's a pretty interesting conversation. And I hope you enjoy it.
I was always searching for truth. How in the world did we get here? Why are we here? But I was always kind of like just trying to always figure stuff out, whether it was sports or school or, what's the truth? So I think it really just ramped up as far as having access to correct information once I started doing more of the yoga and the Chinese medicine, because that's when I found out about those books. I mean, I went to one of the best high schools in the entire, world, St. Ignatius in Cleveland, and one of the top colleges in the world, Emory University, at Atlanta, Georgia. And no one talked about the Bhagavad Gita or yoga, any of this stuff, Chinese medicine. None of it was mentioned in any class I ever had. And it was probably what affects and what I spend most of my time doing now, and what I think is most important for most people to do to achieve peace in their life. So once I really just found out that these books existed, I was able to, boom, you kind of like get to one book and you read it or an article and then it shifts you somewhere else. And, I'll spend, I think I spent a couple hours last night on the internet, just like article, link to this, boom, 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 and you're bouncing all over.
Yeah.
I think most people can relate to that, but it was just finding that right information that did it for me. So I think the second part of your question probably leads more to, I think, the use of different plant substances.
Right.
So such as I think one which obviously is trending now is ayahuasca. I think you have to be in the right place to do that, because I've talked with many people who have done it and from my perspective, probably weren't in the right place.
I was in the complete opposite of the right place when I did it. Every single thing that could be said about my experience is a testament of what not to do.
And that's kind of funny because I can't. Every time I've ever had a psychedelic experience with any of things, it's been one of the most amazing times of my entire life. I've never had a bad experience ever with any of them. But again, I did the work beforehand. I spent, 4 or 5 years doing the yoga and the meditation and the healthy foods and researching it for a long time beforehand. And I think a lot of times people just want to jump in and they want that instant fix, right? You want to take that pain pill, you want your pain to go away. And you really have to realize the amount of time it took you to get to where you're at now. It may take you, luckily I don't think it takes quite as long, but it will take you some time to get back to a place where, whether it's more flexibility, whether it's a better state of health, or being able to tap into that divine consciousness.
I think that's so important too, because I know, again, so many people, and I've made this mistake in the past, where they think of it as just like a fun experience or something. And I mean, even in terms of something like ayahuasca, the work that one needs to put in before going into such things, people tend to disregard. And I've had conversations with people too who have just said, why even do that? Just like smoke DMT, And it's like,
yeah,
I'm one of those people, and I think you're one of those people who, sees the potential in those types of things and instantly knows there's more to this. Like, this is more important than just having fun.
Oh, 100%. The key terms, I think that either Terrence McKenna or one of those guys uses, it's set and setting. And I would say that for everyone out there, if you're using any psychedelics, whatever, what state of mind are you in when you're using it? What are your intentions? What are you trying to achieve out of it? And are you in a good place to do it? If you're in some crazy electronic music festival with most of the people around being very unhealthy and not being in a place, and you do it, you'll have one sort of experience, but it's probably not going to be that mystical religious experience that they've actually have Harvard studies that shows can be produced in the correct setting. I think one of the next biggest trends, and you're going to see that through this organization MAPS. I'm not sure if you've heard of them yet.
Yeah, I know MAPS, and actually one of my friends used to work with Rick Doblin.
Oh wow, that's
I've never met them personally, but yeah, I know of them.
Yeah, so I think that's really where it's going. I know they achieved, I think they're on stage 3 right now for an MDMA. MDMA getting, used as a medicine for, anxiety. I think there's just so many uses that these entheogenic substances have in the correct setting with the right people. It almost needs to shift from that, party drug status to trying to produce that mystical religious experience, which is what really will change people's lives.
Do you think that like the idea of almost like packaging a mystical experience is, I could almost see that going in a really weird direction. Just like imagining the future. I just imagine this like future in my head where, have you ever read Brave New World?
Brave New World.
Right.
I was thinking of that just as you
Soma.
said it.
Yeah.
We got some Soma here, you on the corner store, and like everyone's selling their
Yeah, I mean, I kind of have thoughts about that, but is that something you experimented with when you were a kid, or how did you, like, what was the...
No, nothing. I was raised so, dare to keep kids off drugs. You can't do any of that. And I mean, especially being in high school, I was at an all-boys Catholic high school, and I mean, I don't even think I had alcohol really until maybe I was in college. I was so focused on sports, and from everything I had heard, obviously, like that was really bad for sports. I definitely got into some of the alcohol culture is in college, the whole partying scene, and certainly being in Vegas, spending a lot of times hanging out at the clubs that was a big part of what I did for a while, actually, was going to the nightclubs, and I had a lot of friends who, that's what they did from the gym, who owned a lot of the top Vegas nightclubs and friends with a lot of the stars, and so, I'd go out partying. it was really then too where I got to notice, like, I was never particularly impressed, I would say, with any of these people that I met. They didn't strike me, everyone would talk about how amazing and great they were, and a lot of times they weren't bad people, but they didn't seem like overly talented. They seemed very controlled, I guess, if that makes sense. It just didn't seem to be as enjoyable of a life as the media was portraying it. And so
right.
I specifically remember being in a nightclub for, I think it was one of my friend's birthdays or something. I was at like the top nightclub in Vegas, top table, beautiful people all over the place, and just thinking to my head, there's got to be more to life than this. From there, that's when it really struck me, and it's funny, from that point on, that's when things started slowly changing, and kind of making a turn for it, where like apparently you've got to the top of the pyramid or whatever it supposedly is, and maybe it's not everything it's cracked up to be. And so what are you really looking for? What is anyone really looking for? And I think it's just truth, connection to that infinite source. Everything from there, I think, leads to that place, whether it's the yoga, the healthy foods, the using the psychedelic substances in a correct manner.
So what was your first experience with psychedelics?
Funny enough, it actually was ayahuasca.
Wow.
Funny enough, the first question I asked when I kind of got into that place, right, in the space, yeah. I was like, is this something that I should have done on my own, or I have gone to a shaman and done this?
And she's just like, yeah, you fucked up. No, I'm kidding.
I just got laughed at, and it's like, there's nothing anyone in existence can do that you can't do, which I thought was interestingly enough. But I think you have to spend the time. Most people don't want to spend a year researching it. And they don't want to spend, what does this do? How does this actually work? And like, I know what each of the substances do, how they work on all these different levels. And so just because you're not born in Peru, say, doesn't mean you can't be a shaman. But again, that doesn't just mean you can just show up in Peru and then suddenly you are a shaman because you went there.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot more to it. I had how many years of experience before that with I've studied kinesiology my whole life, the body, whether it's every kind of nutrient that goes in it, and I knew that beforehand. So this was kind of like just a little side note from what I had spent my entire life doing. And I don't necessarily know that I would recommend that for everyone. And a lot of times I tell people that, and their almost instant reaction is kind of like what you're saying, like, oh, you shouldn't have done that. But again, everyone's an individual. You really have to be in that right place. If everyone's, say, 5 years doing yoga every day, switching to, a primarily raw, vegan, vegetarian diet, at that point, you could ask yourself, what are you ready for or not ready for? Or what can you do at that point? And at that point, you should be able to be in touch with your own intuition and what you should or shouldn't do.
When it comes to something like that, you're talking about a traditional ceremonial medicine that's been used for thousands of years, and it comes along with a very recommended protocol for using it. It's a very clean diet for like 2 weeks beforehand.
It's funny. Well, I looked at that diet, and I had been doing that for about 5 years.
Wow. Yeah, so you were prepared.
Right? So, and most people, even the 2 weeks, it's like, it's so much of it is, where are you at as a person? Are you ready for this information, or are you going to get thrown down a crazy, loophole tunnel and not really, not really get going on?
I've known about it and I've researched it. read books, and I've known who Terrence and Dennis McKenna are for many, many years. And so, like, it's been on my radar for a long time. And I always told myself, you know, if I ever do that sort of thing, it'll be in Peru, like, the traditional way, the way it's meant to be done, like, with respect for the plant and the culture. But instead, I ended up doing it a little over a year ago. And it was because I was in, like, a really bad place at the time. Long story short, I had, like, the worst year of my life with my living situation. And, like, I broke up with my girlfriend, and just all this crazy stuff happened that left me in this really broken place. Everything that could go wrong was going wrong. And I ended up talking to this self-proclaimed psychic at the time who told me to go do ayahuasca. And I was just like looking for answers. So even though it was like completely went against every instinct I had, and I was in a terrible place, and I hadn't done any of the like stuff that you're supposed to do leading up to it. So I think I had drank alcohol like a day before, you know, maybe even like multiple times that week. And I don't even drink really like ever, but it was just like that period of my life like I had. And wow. I don't even know like what I ate, but it probably like wasn't good. Like I just wasn't like focused on any of that stuff, you know. It's just like all the things they say like not to do, like I had done. And I even asked the guy running it, I was just like is that really that important? And he's just like, yeah, you'll be fine. And wow. Long story short, I ended up in like the worst. It was absolute nightmare. Yeah, it was a nightmare. And then like the next like 8 months took like that long to like get myself back together.
Wow, yeah. I'm sure you learned a lot from that though, right?
It changed my life, quite literally. Like it's probably the most important thing I've ever done.
Wow.
Not even just had that experience, but just the whole 2-year period of just finding my way from that like brokenness and experiencing all that, going through that, and the learning that came afterwards, and putting myself back together afterwards. And it was literally like getting torn apart and then having to put myself back together. Any
specific, like, I know it could take a long time to talk, but any specific bad part of it that you remember in particular, or what made it, I guess, bad from your perspective?
In retrospect, obviously, like, I thought it was so bad then, but now it's like, okay, like I understand sort of like what all that was for, and how I like needed to experience it in order to like get to where I am now. So I wouldn't like label it as bad, but I understand what you mean, like more like difficult. Like what was difficult? Oh man, it was just, well, for one thing, the people that were running it were not qualified to do something like that.
Wow, yeah. I hear that a lot. Even here in Austin, I've heard there's several different groups doing it, and it's funny. One of my friends out here, who she actually works with us once in a while. She's kind of part of the Hollywood thing for a while, but also part of the Santo Daime Church. And I think she said she's done ayahuasca like 250 some times.
Wow.
Which I'm sure you could imagine, the kind of place where she's in. And she's just absolutely amazing. But one thing she really warns people is, watch out for all these different groups trying to promote how amazing they are. There's certainly, as by a lot of these people, it's becoming very money making, and everyone's trying to get those instant results, and it may not be all it's cracked up to be.
It's like you said, it's something that's becoming very trendy, and I think people need to be informed and realize what's actually out there. Because even during ceremony, I remember a couple people saying, hey, this is my first time doing this. And then halfway through the ceremony, they're screaming and crying their eyes out and going, wow, this is like, I feel like I got tricked and like I'm going insane. And this is not what I was told it was. Granted, I have no idea like what's going on with those people now. But I think, there's been so much positivity talked about it and the healing aspects and going to Peru and doing it, and I think it's super, super important for people to realize that there is like a lot of darkness that's finding its way into that sort of place now, and you need to be aware of it.
I would be interested to hear more people that say they had really bad experiences and see how maybe it did affect them.
They're
like
out,
you said.
they're out there. They're out there. I think they're just not speaking about it as much. Just, I mean, I think why it's important to have a conversation about it. It's also like there's a point when you're like ready to talk about it. Like I tried to talk about it. I talked about it so much when I wasn't ready to talk about it.
You hear so many different opinions from people, and a lot of times you're right that a lot of times people don't have like your best interests at heart. Even from, you're even seeing down in Peru some of these fake places and fake shamans popping up. And then again in the US, you're seeing these like you said, the underground people that aren't ready there. And again, I think some people are just trying to make quick bucks off of it, and they don't realize how much time, energy, and effort really needs to go into preparing someone for this. And what's unfortunate too is a lot of times the people that are doing it don't want to put the time, energy. So it's really weird, but in a way, almost everyone's kind of getting maybe what they deserve, strangely enough.
Yeah. When you go to Peru or like you deal with a real shaman, there is that like idea of something that you're doing something sacred.
Won't you set your second skin?
When it comes to things like this, and like you're saying before with organizations like MAPS, or they even talk about microdosing psilocybin now, the active ingredient in psychedelic mushrooms. And
I would say I am a huge fan of that, actually. I think the next huge trend is going to be microdosing, which is, I've done tons of research. I actually, funny enough, I did my final project, I took my past semester, I'm doing a master's at University of Texas right now in kinesiology. Last semester, I took a class in the nursing school, which was complementary and alternative medicine. And my final project, I did a presentation of the use of psilocybin mushrooms in anxiety in cancer patients. I just think it's really important to start getting this information out there, because people realize how absolutely useful these substances can be. And I mean, we'll get fought till the death by the pharmaceutical industries and these, big mega junk fast food companies and all that, because there's not money in people being healthy or people being killed. All the money is being in the middle, where people can go to their jobs, work their 9 to 5, come home, watch TV, be on their pharmaceuticals, and eat their fast food, and just repeat that process. There's so much creative expression that can be expressed now. Humans don't need to be doing most of the jobs that exist nowadays. If we can all just work together, there's so much that can be accomplished, and so much free time that we can all just have to ourselves for creative expression. I think we're slowly getting, further and further to that point where we can maybe see that actually happen.
Yeah, and when you start being able to free up your time, it leaves doors open for bigger things. My sort of fear I have is with the idea of microdosing becoming more popular, or using these things for medicine, is like people putting it in place of nature as a way to connect to nature and to connect to spirit, or to connect to yourself. And this is what I've been guilty of, and has happened to me in the past, is that, and I think this might just, it's like you said, everyone is individual, right? So it's different for everybody. But for me, I find that I'm just a better person. I actually find I'm more spiritually connected at one with myself and like the environment when I'm not doing those things. And that could be because I've already done it, and now it's like I don't need to anymore, or that I've just found that like the reconnection to nature and like deeper aspects of myself through everyday life, or just through going hiking, through eating right, through focusing on the simple things. And so I get the concern that people could fall into that trap where I did in the past, where it's like I associated connection to that sort of thing through the microdosing or through smoking cannabis, and then I was ignoring the ways in which I was able to connect to it on a daily basis. Do you see that sort of similar danger?
I'd say it kind of comes in phases nowadays for me, actually. And I haven't actually done ayahuasca in a while, strangely enough. Anytime, even not super recently, but within a year, I'd have in my head like, okay, cool, I've got this whole weekend free, and I would go to do it, and like you get that voice, right? And like, no, right. you don't need to do this now. And there's other times again in the past where I had no intention whatsoever to do anything, and it's just like that thing comes along you, and you're like, boom, suddenly I'd be there, and I'd be taking it, and just kind of out of the blue, essentially. And I noticed that too with all the other substances you said, with the microdosing and all that. It's certainly nothing that is needed on a daily basis or anything like that, but it's almost like you just kind of know when you need to use it, I guess, if that makes sense. Especially the microdosing psilocybin is, I'm trying to remember the guy who originally did it, but he was almost doing it till his death, and it was like a 4-day protocol, and I think it was like once every 4 days or something.
I think it was Albert Hoffman, yes, I believe that was I mean, the inventor of LSD. He microdosed LSD up until he was passed away.
That's exactly, yeah, and it was like every 4 days or something like that. But it's one of those things where it's funny. My mom would always like to tell me, like, why do you need to take all these supplements? Because can't you get everything you get from food? And I would love to get everything from food. I don't think that's practical nowadays. I mean, between, honestly, all the junk and air pollution and stuff they're dumping in the air to what's in the water, I think the soil and the food, even especially the fruits and vegetables, are so deplete of what they're used to be that, unfortunately, yeah, I like using spirulina, and I like goji berries and all these other things, because
I love goji berries. So good.
Yeah, they're still from, right? It's not like, I mean, but they just don't grow here. Like, there's not goji berry farms here in Texas, or sure, I'd love to go to the store and get some local, goji berries. So a lot of the Birch Superfoods line isn't really what I would consider supplements. The vegan protein has, several ingredients, but most of the stuff that we have is just straight up from nature, but it's just not growing here in the US. But I think the idea of the microdosing is giving maybe what humans used to have before they were maybe artificially cut off from that connection to the source.
I give up on so willingly. Fragments taken, look in glass, see right through me, sleepless, walls down, I'm found. I give up on so willingly.
Well, that concludes the second part of the interview with Ryan Muetzel. I do have a bit more conversation with him recorded that I got to edit down into a cool podcast, so I'll try to do that for you guys. This episode is sponsored by Apologenesis, Nourishment for the Spiritual Warrior. If you would like to get in on the conversation, join the Conscious Vibe Tribe on Facebook and check out the Conscious Vibe on YouTube and SoundCloud.